and she's just jumped in as well, our special guest this week, NFL Network host and reporter Rachel Bonetta. Rachel, welcome. Liz Banderi, NFL Girl UK, welcome. Rachel, you're so prompt. I love this. How are you? How was your Tuesday?
Well, it stressed me out because I watch so many Instagram lives, and then you always watch the host like they're trying to get here, and I can't figure out the internet, and oh my God, it always just stresses me out to watch people wait. So I wanted to be prompt. I didn't want to do that to you.
Thank you. I appreciate it, because as you may have sensed, it's the first time I've actually added people myself. Usually a mystery hand comes in and adds people, and I can't even cope. Liz, your first time co-hosting the show, because for the last couple of weeks you've been sunning yourself in Greece. Not jealous at all. How are you?
Oh, fancy.
As you can see, I really got the tan.
I've got a nice fake light that's giving me a fake tan. Otherwise, it is not there at all.
You live in Los Angeles. You should be sun-kissed.
I'm Canadian. I usually snow and in the dark all year round. Also, I'm a pale gal. So when I am outside, I usually have a gigantic hat that I usually walk my dogs with. When I am outside, I'm covered from head to toe because I get burnt so easily. So the fake light really.
Fake lights are all our friends. Look, Rachel, we're so excited to have you with us. For our UK fans who maybe aren't so familiar with Rachel yet, I'm sure you're becoming increasingly familiar to our UK NFL audience because you're one of the hosts of NFL Game Day on a Sunday, which you can watch on Sky Sports NFL. Yes, I got this plug in. You're also giving expert views on NFL sports betting, which I can't wait to dive into a bit with you because it's new to the NFL and you do things slightly differently in the States as to how we talk about betting over here. So I'm a little confused. We'll get into that in a bit. And as well as now being at NFL Network, you've already had this amazing career at Fox Sports and been doing some really fun stuff. I know you've got a background in soccer or football, as we call it. So look, I want to
I wanted to fit in with your audience today. So
no.
Amazing.
Oh, opposite? Am I going to start some fights today? I'm just going to...
You will divide people immediately. I don't think that's gone down so well with Liz. Liz is
sorry, Man United household here.
Not ideal.
Yeah, very much Manchester United on this side.
Yeah, okay. It's fine. Look, we can all get along. We'll put it aside. Look, in your honor, I've got Brown's jersey next to me today, like for your benefit. So we're all trying to get along.
It's gone. You know what? It's gone.
Someone's just commented going, "Boo Liverpool," and they're like the monkey emoji, like no. Rachel, I'm really interested to find out first of all, like how you got started in your report.
Straight. Yeah, sorry, you guys are freaking a little bit, so I'm so sorry if I. I feel like we are just on two different sides of the world right now. So if my internet is so crappy, I'm of how I got started. I actually, I dropped out of college. I know we're trying to keep it together here. I dropped out of college, and I was very broke. And so I was just bartending and applying to like every single job that was available on, whatever. I think I found this job originally on Facebook, and it was basically like the Toronto FC dream job is what it was called. And Toronto FC is a Major League Soccer team in Toronto, if you guys are unfamiliar. And I went to school for broadcast journalism, so I had some experience in front of the camera. And the job was basically to be the in-arena host and to interview players and just kind of like be following the team. And so I was just like, oh, this sounds interesting and probably pays better than a bartending job. And I don't want to smell dried up Red Bull on the floor anymore. So I applied for it, not knowing, like, in all honesty, I hadn't really followed Toronto FC. I wasn't that big of my brother was a huge Arsenal fan, but other than that, that didn't really leave a great taste in my mouth, if you know what I'm saying. So I went into this job not really knowing anything. And I think that they, liked my personality. And I remember I had the name of Torsten Frings written down on my hand, who was the captain at the time, just so I could be like, oh yeah, I love Torsten Frings. He's great. So anyways, I ended up getting that job. I beat out over like 500 people for this job and just like totally immersed myself in the world of soccer and MLS. And it was amazing. I was there for a couple of years. And then the head office in New York City, the league, kind of started seeing, it was like when YouTube first started. So I was just, basically TFC like gave me the keys to their YouTube channel, and they're like, do whatever you want, like whatever this app is, like, meh, nobody's gonna watch what you put up there. And then YouTube blew up, and then MLS saw what I was doing, and they're like, I still remember exactly where I was sitting at my desk, and an email came through, and it was from the head office, and they were like, would you ever, we've seen what you've done, we love what you're doing, would you ever consider moving to New York City? And I was like, I'm from like the smallest town in Ontario, Canada. Like, that was still maybe to this day the craziest email that I've ever received, and just like out of the blue. And I was just like, oh my God, yes. How can I apply for a visa? Please help. And my visa got declined twice. So I was, 2 declined visas away from still living in Canada today, but I didn't give up. And so I ended up moving to New York City and working for the league. And then about like 6 months after that, I got a call from Fox, and it was the same thing. We've been seeing what you're doing. Would you ever move to Los Angeles? And I was like, what is happening right now? It was just so wild. And then so I accepted the job and moved to LA and was with Fox for the last 6 amazing years. And it's been so wonderful to grow up basically at that place. And then just joined NFL Network. So it's been a really weird ride. Definitely started in like the soccer world, and, went to Russia and covered the World Cup, which was crazy. I have lots of stories about that. And then when I got home from Russia, they were basically like, I was like the little kid at Fox, and they were always kind of trying to like grow me and, give me new opportunities. And they were like, there was this new show called Lock It In. Do you know anything about sports gambling or football? And I was just like, I know a lot about one kind of football, but I can learn about, I grew up in Canada. I didn't watch a whole lot of NFL. Like, I was familiar with the storylines and like would catch a game here and there, but like basically my career was just soccer. So then I just dove head first into sports gambling, learned everything that there was to know about every single game, and as well as football. And so it's been a pretty crazy couple of years, but now I'm at NFL Network, and it's so exciting, and everyone's been so welcoming, and it's cool. I will say it's very nice to just focus on one sport. I'm a huge basketball fan, and I love watching the Raptors games. I don't necessarily want to watch like every single like game during the regular season to keep up with storylines. So I'm excited to just like have my focus on one thing and really be able to dive into it. So that's kind of my story. It's pretty wild. Been a pretty wild ride for sure.
It's amazing, and I can totally relate to you on that feeling of being able to just hone in a bit more on one sport, because I cover all different ones, but this time of year, pretty much just the NFL, and it's like, oh, I can actually give it the focus. It's been such a wild ride for you. It's quite a sensational story, really, like literally going from that first job all the way up to where you are now. You say that the guys at NFL Network have been really welcoming. What's it like being part of that family? Because you watch on TV and you can tell everyone's having the best time.
It really is like a family. I think one thing that I really noticed when I first kind of walked in was, first off, their new setup. I didn't see the old setup in Culver, but they have this, for those of you that don't know, they have this brand new, beautiful building right outside of SoFi. My desk, like literally you can see in the arena or in the stadium from my desk. And it's just so exciting to be a part of this, kind of like new and improved situation. But also, one thing that I noticed really early on is that people have been there for a really long time. And I don't think that happens if you're at a bad place. I think people stay where they feel like a family, where they feel welcomed and really excited about where they work. And that's one thing that I noticed, is that everyone just like gets along really well and is just like excited to be there. And I think it's definitely been helpful that we've had some like pretty crazy games the first few weeks, and everyone's just totally, you know, I have like a 5 a.m. wake up call or like a 4:45 a.m. wake up call on Sunday mornings, and like I'm not doing that for nothing. So I'm so excited to show up Sunday morning, and the big boys are there, and you know, the big studio show. I've never been a part of something like that, so it's been really, really cool.
And what do you think it is about, I guess, the NFL that drew you in, Rachel?
I think that here's the thing. I feel like as adults, and especially as women, I don't know if you guys find this, but I feel like if we're not fans of something from the time that we're like a child, it's a really scary thing to kind of hop into. Like, especially the NFL, where, you know, people have just been fans of this sport since they were children. You know, you always hear about these stories of like, oh, I watched games with my mom and my dad every single Sunday. And like, it's just, it's a huge American tradition. And so to hop into that as like an adult, and especially as a woman, it's a little bit scary. Like, I had to ask a lot of dumb questions, but once I got over that, I then realized, like, from the outside looking in, I was just like, I want to be a part of this group so bad, but like, I don't feel like I belong. I'm like a soccer nerd, and, you know, I can't cross this line. I'll get made fun of. People will like call me a poser and, you know, all this stuff. But then at some point, you know, watching games, I was like, you know what, screw it. Like, I don't care if people think that I'm a newbie. I am. And I think that that's the beautiful thing about sports is like, you can find a team and you can fall in love at any point in your life, at any age. You know, this is a Liverpool household. I'm sorry, I've already apologized for that. But it's because my partner is a huge Liverpool fan, and he started watching Liverpool when he was in college. And he just fell in love with it. And I love that. I love finding something when you're a little bit older and it's not necessarily something you grew up with, and you're making the decision to fall in love with it. You're not doing it because it's just been a part of your life for so long. So I think it was scary to kind of jump into the NFL world. Especially because it's the biggest sport in the United States for sure, and soccer's growing, the other football's growing, but yeah, I've always been drawn to it, but kind of always just afraid to cross that line. And I think maybe a lot of women I think there's a lot of women that are fans of NFL, but some of them are like kind of tentatively like dipping their toes in the water. But I'm here to say it's all good. Come on over. Water's warm.
Come join us. It's a fun place to be, and I think that's something that I know I definitely relate to, and probably Liz too. Like, in the UK, it's not a sport unless you have very chilled out parents with the time the games are on. It's not a sport you grow up watching. There wasn't a ton of it on TV until relatively recently, but once you kind of get that hook in, you're like, oh, I like this. How can I like no more? And then next thing you know, a whole career gets born out of it. You mentioned sort of that falling in love with a team thing. Mm-hmm. I know, actually, Liz, I'm going to ask you this because I know you're a massive Seahawks fan. And I'm not gloating as a Rams fan that you had the loss this weekend. Yeah. But how did you fall in love with the Seahawks? And then Rachel, I'm going to ask you how you fell in love with the Browns as your team, hence the jersey. So Liz, why did you become a Seahawks fan?
Yeah, so for me, I've from like a rugby league town. You know, I went to touring cars when I was a kid. Used to watch boxing with my dad as a kid. So I've always been around sports. But it was 9 years ago when I met my now husband in our very early days of dating. He was literally watching the NFL one day, and I was like, oh, this is pretty cool. Like, some similarities, but absolutely zero similarities to rugby league. And so I kind of got into that. I literally chose Seahawks as my team that night. And then as I've, you know, it's been 9 years of watching the game now that I've come to love a lot of, you follow the players. It's the players that you love. I mean, Seahawks will always be my team, but there's so many players around the league that I'm like, I love watching because they're absolutely incredible. So yeah, that's how I got into it.
I'm going to say this to you again, Liz, because I said this when we spoke earlier before we went live, that look, we know you're a Matthew Stafford fan. If you want to jump on that bandwagon now, it's better than jumping onto it in December, okay?
Not a secret, I love Matt Stafford.
Just come on, look, the Rams right now. Our producers are Rams fan. We're having a Rams party over here in London. Rachel, how did you become a Browns fan? This girl from Toronto is now, you know, Cleveland all the way. Why?
No, I always get that question. They're like, people are like, are you from Cleveland? And I'm like, no, I'm from Canada. And it's almost too confusing to people that they don't even press on and ask more questions. They're like, all right, I don't even want to know. But I've always been a fan of a strong underdog. I just always feel like they have better stories. There's more to root for. And when I first started Fox Bet Live or Lock It In with Fox Sports 3 or 4 years ago. It was the year that the Browns were on Hard Knocks, and still very, very bad. I had this, okay? I didn't jump on this wagon when we were on the way up. So I fell in love with this like mess of a team. They hadn't won so long. Hugh Jackson was like 0-55, not that bad, but it was bad. It was like in the 30s. And Baker Mayfield had just joined, and he had such a big personality coming in from college. And I was just like, I love these guys. So I was kind of tentatively on them during Hard Knocks. I was just like, this is a fun team. Like, let me kind of jump on this. And then I think it was week 2. Tyrod Taylor was our starting quarterback. He went down. Baker Mayfield comes in, wins their
always week 2 with Taylor.
Bridges unlocked. Cleveland got to drink beer, and I was just like, "Oh my God, sign me up! When can I get a Brown tattoo? Like this team is a mess. I love it, hot mess." And then that year was kind of had its ups and downs, and then year 2 was bad. Sophomore slump for Baker. It was like really, really messy. And then year 3, we went to the freaking playoffs. And now we're in year 4 of my fandom. And I just feel like, I know that Browns fans have been through a lot. And, I do not know that feeling. But, yeah, it's just such a fun team to cheer for. And I just think you need to make a decision. Like, find a team with a fun storyline and, hop on in.
I think Hard Knocks though tends to do that, because that's part of the reason I became a Rams fan. Because if you don't grow up with the sport and you don't know these histories and you don't know these teams, that's how you get to know them and feel those connections with players and people in there, I think. But
yeah.
Hey, you've packed it in. 4 years as a Browns fan, still been a bit of a roller coaster.
I also think it's like fun to follow storylines too. Just like you like Matt Stafford and you're a Seahawks fan, like. I think that's what Hard Knocks does so well at, is finding these like storylines of people that you want to root for. And I wanted to root for Baker, and I wanted to root for Hugh Jackson, even though he's gone now. And so that's what, made me fall in love with this team. It wasn't necessarily the way that they played. It's just I like guys.
Liz, do you want to jump in? I've got questions for Liz, actually. It's coming on the chat, but you go.
Yeah, no, definitely. So, I'd love to hear kind of, obviously you've been doing this a little while now. Like, do you remember your first, like, big NFL story?
Geez, my first NFL story. Well, I'm not really a reporter per se, so I don't really, like, crack any stories. I don't really have any inside scoops. But I feel like going to my first Super Bowl was really, really exciting. That was, like, a really cool moment. I was at Digital. And this was when I was still, like, covering soccer. And they, I was doing a lot of sketches and some funny bits. And so they were like, Fox had the Super Bowl in Houston. And it was the big Patriots Atlanta game, which was so fun. And so I got sent there, and Lady Gaga was performing, and I got to like be down on the field, and I was just like, what is my life? Like, that was really my first taste of football, which is hilarious and like such a brag that my first taste of football was like at an insane Super Bowl. Maybe that's when I started falling in love with it. But I feel like that was the first like surreal moment where, I know lots of people say this, but I'm constantly reminding myself, like, I'm really from such a small town. I grew up in the woods, like riding a friggin' dirt bike, just a mess. And the fact that I've just like, it was a real moment that I was just like, oh my God, I'm so proud of myself. Like, I've just come so far and just like clawed my way through sports and, women in sports and all the stuff that we have to put up with. And it was just a really cool moment. So I think that's something that I look back on really fondly.
Not to take anything away from the magic of that moment, but that's also as well there's a brilliant thing you did with Katie Nolan when you were sent to report on the Patriots plane arriving in Houston. And I have to say, it's just genius, because you're stood there and nothing's happening, but somehow you make it so entertaining and so fun. How important is it to you to bring that lighter side of sports to stuff? Because yes, it's serious, and yes, it's important, but also there are like 17,000 cameras watching a plane arrive, which nothing's happening.
I was like, do you want me to go out and just wait am I being punished? Like, what did I do to deserve this assignment? No, that was actually really fun. I think that I know my lane, and I feel like this is kind of the piece of advice that I give to women coming up in this industry, and really anybody that's coming up in the sports industry, is like, figure out what your lane is. Like, I'm not, I failed ninth grade math. I don't really think of things in an analytical way. I'm not an analyst. I'm not, you know, I like stats to an extent, but that's not my lane. And so I feel like, you know, there's so many people in this world that do that stuff really, really well. I shouldn't try to touch it. What I do well is like being myself and being goofy. And I also feel like there's a space for that in sports. Like, think about how you watch football, either one. Think about how you watch any kind of sports. You like to sit on your couch, you like to be with friends, you like to have a beer, you like to eat food, and you like to just like chat and talk. It's a good hang. And that's, I think, what I bring to what I'm doing is I just try to talk to, you know, whoever's on that side of the camera as if we're like sitting on the same couch watching the same game, breaking it down in a very easy way. I also keep in the back of my mind, I had a sports podcast about a year ago called Hall of Shame, and we talked about the craziest scandals that happened in the sports world. And never in my life have I done something in sports that had a majority female fan base. And I feel like it was that because it was a very conversational way of talking about sports. And we were talking about sports in a way that was like dramatic and gossipy and super fun and welcoming. And I feel like sometimes watching sports, especially sports gambling programs, is like there's a large barrier to entry. Like, sometimes it's very hard to understand what people are talking about. And they're so in the weeds that I try to make content that would speak to me as a fan. Like, one of my favorite shows is Good Morning Football, and I love that show because they're just hanging out. They're just talking to us as if we're there at the breakfast table. And I think that that's what I want to do. That's what I want to emulate and give to other people as well. Is like more of a welcoming, you know, I'm new here. Y'all can be new here too. Like, come, this is what's going on. Did you hear what Jalen Hurts said last night? That's crazy. I don't want to talk about his stats. I want to talk about what he was talking about at his press conference. You know what I mean? I feel like that's the lane that I try to stay in. It's just fun, and the kind of content that I like to watch is what I try to also do.
So I know that obviously a big part of your role is covering sports betting, which isn't always, I guess, the easiest subject to understand from the outside. How did that become your thing?
Oh no. What was her question?
It was how did sports betting become your thing? And then I'm going to ask you what on earth you guys are talking about over there, because you do it so differently from us. But how did you get into the betting side of it?
Well, the betting side basically came because I got this opportunity to host Lock It In. And I remember being handed like a Bible of like, okay, here are all the games. Here's all the terminology. And I was just like, oh my God, I just remember like sliding down my wall and being like, I'm never gonna understand this. This is so intense. So many numbers, so many signs. And then I really took a second and just like sat down with it and you know, somebody helped me understand it. And I was just like, oh my God, it really does, as a viewer, you know, you have some skin in the game because your team is playing, you know, maybe you're watching the Seahawks and you really want them to win. But also if you're, you know, playing side games and you're sports gambling, it's just an added layer of excitement, really. And I think that the thing that I always bring up with people that are getting into it is I always give basketball as an example. You know, you could be watching a really boring game that's just like not going anywhere, but you could have, you know, Kawhi Leonard, you know, balling out, and then that is what you're paying attention to. You're not necessarily paying attention to the score. So I just think that it adds another layer of excitement to whatever game you're watching. So that's why I got into it. At first it was really I don't know about you guys, but I don't like things that I don't understand. Like, that's why I didn't play golf for the longest time. That's why I didn't watch football. But then, you know, once you take the time to do it and understand it, it really is super simple and super exciting. And I think that it's, you know, blowing up right now. I know it's been over with you guys for a while, but in the United States, it's like really becoming like picking up some steam. So it's really excited to, I'm super stoked that I understand it and like am in at an early point that I am like teaching other people about it. So it's really, really cool to be a part of.
Okay, so teach me, because over here, the way we do our betting odds, it's like you've got like a 2-to-1 favorite, or, you know, it's like a fraction. And I used to have that fully down, and then someone I work with scrambled my mind. but yeah, we have 2-1 favorite or like 5-2 and all these kind of things.
Mm-hmm.
What does it mean when it's 7 over or 3 under, or like, is there a concise way you can explain that? Because when I hear people talking about it on NFL Network, I'm like, that feels like that's a good thing, but I don't fully understand what that means.
We still have the fractions over here, which, like, to be honest, I hate to. That's not the way that my brain works. I don't like math. I don't do math. But I think that the easiest way and the way that sports gambling is going to continue to grow is, like, making it in a digestible way. So, like, okay, $10, you're going to bet $10 to win $1. You know what I mean? Like, so you just make it, instead of doing the fractions, like, oh, just put this money down and then you win this, or do this and you do that. I think that what I really like is paying attention to, like, I don't know which games you guys play, but I'm a big fan of spreads. I think that money line can be really exciting, but I feel like spreads can really go anywhere. And so, yeah, I think that the way that sports gambling is moving is getting away from the fractions and the numbers and the math, because I think that the average person is going to be like, I'm not even going to bother with that, and just making it way more digestible. So I'm going to skip the math lesson and say pass on this question. But I do think that that's the way that it continues to grow, is just like making it, you know, that's what we did on our show, was just making it a little bit more digestible. I know, like, obviously the hardcore gamblers know all of the, you know, terminology, and, you know, they don't have time for all that stuff. But I think that to make it a much more popular thing in the United States, it will be a lot more digestible to people. And so they're not worrying about doing the math, and it's just like simple X versus Y.
Well, I hope once you guys have simplified it, we then adopt that, because
to you guys. Yeah.
Like, you've simplified some of our spellings of words and dropped vowels and stuff in, like, aluminium. You can do the same for betting.
Yeah.
So hopefully we're going to be seeing you a lot more on our NFL coverage, you know, this year. What are you most looking forward to this season?
What am I looking forward to most this season? I mean, I think it's pretty easy to answer this question. The Super Bowl's in LA. The Super Bowl's literally right across the street from our studios. So to be there, like, there's going to be so many celebs coming. Who knows who's going to in the Super Bowl this year. I think it's going to be really, it's just going to be so exciting I love traveling for the Super Bowl. I love being in Miami. I love being in Houston, but there's something nice about being able to sleep in your own bed and, you know, with those long hours. So, yeah. Oh, I'm seeing somebody say she's looking forward to the Browns winning the Super Bowl. Ew. But Super Bowl, I'm so excited to be a part of it. It's going to be really fun.
There's so many people now being like, Browns in the Super Bowl, Browns in the Super Bowl. Look, Rachel, before we let you go, because what time is it in LA right now? I can't even.
It's 11:29. It's like way later for you guys. I'm cruising.
Yeah. Before we let you go, though, I'm sure you've got plenty on today. What is your advice from people coming into the industry, and young women in particular? Because we're seeing more and more women in the NFL across the board, on camera, in offices, coaching, everything. Mm-hmm. So you're all about being your authentic self. What's the one takeaway for you?
I really think it's, you know, I know it's not as simple as that, as just saying, like, be yourself, but I really do think that, you know, the static just reporting live, I think that is, you know, kind of in the past. And I think that people are being really receptive to big personalities on television, especially with women. Like, I feel like we're getting more and more cool opportunities and cool roles, and you know, don't feel boxed in or that you have to be one thing. And I also think that there are so many ways to get discovered now. Like, you know, I have a hard time with social media, and I think it's just always changing, and I'm always the one that's like, no, I don't want to get a TikTok. Are you kidding me? I have it. Now I'm all the way in, but you know, I got my start on YouTube, and so I think it's, like, really good to remember there's so many fun people that I follow on social media, and so many people on TikTok that I feel like are getting some really cool opportunities because they're utilizing their space and they're utilizing the tools that they have on their phone. Don't wait for somebody to call you and, you know, give you an opportunity. Just go after it. I think that that's one thing that I can give myself credit for, is, like, I've just never stopped. I got one opportunity and I was just like, okay, baby, what's next? Boom, 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 boom. And I think everyone's different, but never settle. As soon as you're comfortable, bing, bang, boom, out the door. Let's keep going. So that's what I would suggest. Just keep moving forward, keep growing. If you're not doing something that's growing you, move on.
That is sound advice. Stay uncomfortable, stay hungry. Thank you so much for joining us on Her Huddle. It's been a joy speaking to you. Your energy is like beaming halfway around the world, from LA to London and Manchester. And we love watching you on game day on a Sunday morning. So keep up the good work. And thank you so much for joining us. We'll be back next week.
Thank you so much for having me.
Our
this
pleasure.
is so fun.
Good. We think so. We'll be back next week with more Her Huddle. And if you miss any of this chat with Rachel, it'll be on the NFL UK.
I feel like if I stay here and smile, then yeah.
I don't know how to end it.
Okay, thank you so much for having me. I'll come on.